they have a very clear picture of what happened almost before the person who was injured even makes it to the hospital.
When the defense starts investigating before the victim leaves the crash scene, how do you catch up and win? Welcome to Make Your Case, the podcast where attorneys break down the most impactful cases of their careers and the stories behind them. I'm Joe Douglas, longtime investigative journalist and founder of Clear-Eyed Media, where we produce legal videos that help lawyers win cases and reach better outcomes. Today's guest is Tim Semelroth, a plaintiff's personal injury lawyer from Cedar Rapids, Iowa. He spent decades litigating truck and commercial vehicle crashes. Tim explains why treating a truck crash like a car crash is a costly mistake, and what it really takes to stand toe-to-toe with a trucking company's rapid response team. In this episode, he reveals how a sudden snowstorm defense fell apart under scrutiny, how a family member in the courtroom spotted something that changed the trial, and why understanding the corporate pressures behind the wheel often exposes the real cause of a crash. Tim, thanks for being here. You've been practicing law related to trucking or truck accidents for like
Yes.
25 years. What drew you to that part of the law?
Well, it was a situation where I really enjoy being able to use all of the tools available to tell your client's story. So whether it's using focus groups or it is using trial techniques that involve things like psychodrama that I learned at the Trial Lawyers College, those are the things that I enjoy most about presenting a case at trial. And it just so happens that in order to use all those tools, it needs to be a fairly significant case. And the thing about trucking cases is there's really, it's very rare to have a trucking case that's just a fender bender. When you're dealing with 80,000-pound vehicles, when there's a collision, it tends to really hurt somebody. And therefore, it's a case where you can justify the time and expense of using all those tools that I like to use to tell my client's story.
Did you start out in this field, or did you just kind of get into it somehow?
So I started out doing plaintiff's personal injury work, and that was as a result of a process of elimination. I had clerked at firms of various sizes doing various things, both in Iowa and in Arizona. And then I had done a federal clerkship. And after those experiences, I knew that I wanted to represent people, not companies, not the government. And so I had the chance to join a small plaintiff's personal injury practice. And so for the majority of my time as a lawyer, I've done all kinds of injury and disability claims. I've represented people in medical malpractice cases and workers' compensation claims and about every flavor of personal injury case you can imagine. But about 8 years ago, I realized the cases that I got the most satisfaction out of working on were commercial motor vehicle cases. And so I made a conscious decision to shift my practice and focus almost exclusively on those. I had had exposure to trucking cases from the very beginning of my career. In fact, when I was in college, I had clerked for my college mock trial coach, and he actually brought me to second chair a case while I was still in undergrad, and that was a trucking case. And so I didn't realize it at the time, but there were aspects of that, whether it was learning the federal motor carrier safety regulations or learning about the training that truck drivers go through in order to be able to safely drive a tractor trailer, that appealed to me, learning those things, learning that world. I did many other cases after that, but then when I was taking a look at the cases that I got the most satisfaction out of working on, I realized that one thing that a lot of them had in common is they involved commercial motor vehicles. And that's when I started doing some things to make sure that I could handle those cases at the highest levels.
Okay, great. And so in your career, you have a substantial career. Is there any case, one case that kind of stands out that was really impactful for you, that's memorable, either good or bad, like that you learned a lot from, or that shaped your practice or how you do things?
Sure. So, an example of a recent truck accident case that I tried was a case that involved a mother who was driving her child to school on a snowy day in Iowa, and a semi driver who was trying to beat the bad weather back, and he ended up uh, causing a collision with my client. And because of the weather and because of some other issues, the trucking company tried to avoid taking responsibility for the crash, claiming first that it was my client's fault, and then later claiming it was a sudden emergency, an act of God, because it occurred during a snowstorm.
So how did you get around that?
Well, the first step was looking at the investigation and realizing that there was physical evidence that showed that my client she was slowing down on a highway to make a left turn. And so the physical evidence was able to show that she had her turning signal on. And then we did some more investigation, and we found out that there was actually a traffic camera that was in the vicinity. And so we were able to get access to that and actually see the crash occurring. And the challenge, though, was that it was the view of both vehicles on the camera was relatively limited in time, and so it still allowed the trucking company to claim that yes, maybe your client did have her turn signal on, maybe she was slowing down, but they claimed that there was a sudden gust of snow that obscured the vision of the truck driver, and that's what led to the crash, as opposed to the truck driver driving too fast for conditions.
And so, I mean, first off, like this sounds like I hear this a lot from attorneys, from plaintiff lawyers, where you're essentially dealing with they kind of like it's everything in the kitchen sink sometimes with the defense. Is that kind of like what you're dealing with here, or it's like, oh wait, but it wasn't this, it was the weather, or it wasn't, But how did you get past that, and how do you deal with these sort of like multifaceted things being thrown at you?
Well, I mean, ultimately, you're trying to get to the truth of the matter. And so it starts with an investigation where you're trying to figure out what actually happened. You're interviewing witnesses. You are, taking a look at the investigation that was done. One of the challenges that we had in this case was that my client truly believed that she was going to get better. And so she did not reach out to an attorney until months after the crash occurred. And that really puts you behind the eight ball in these trucking cases, because most trucking companies have a rapid response team that goes to the scene of the crash immediately. They take measurements, they talk to witnesses, and so they have a very clear picture of what happened almost before the person who was injured even makes it to the hospital. And so I didn't have the benefit of that kind of investigation. You never do when you represent a plaintiff, but a lot of times I'll get a call within hours or days of the crash, and then I can hire my own accident reconstruction team, and we can go out, and a lot of times there's still physical evidence that we can see at the scene that helps us identify what happened, and we can also inspect the vehicles and do downloads that allow us to get that kind of information. In this case, I didn't have any of that because the client didn't think she needed a lawyer until months after the crash. And so because of that, I was limited to the information that was gathered by law enforcement and then interviewing the witnesses who were there.
That's interesting. So what are the challenges from that? You talked about how you guys, your team will do your own investigation and in downloading. And for I always like to point out that there's a lot of attorneys that hopefully watch this or understand it and probably know what you're talking about, but some lay people may not. What do you mean by downloading?
So commercial tractor trailers in the U.S. have to have an electronic recording system, so a black box. And you can download that black box and get information about the speed of the vehicle, when the brakes were applied, that sort of thing. And so it's very helpful if you go to the scene within hours or days after the crash. You can often see evidence on the pavement, whether it's skid marks or gouges in the cement as to where the crash took place. Sometimes you can even see debris that's still on, on the pavement. And then, so you're recording that, you're taking measurements, and then you are going and examining the vehicles, and you can measure the damage, how the crush evidence on the vehicles, and then when you download the electronic data recorders in the truck and sometimes in the passenger vehicle as well, you can get a pretty clear picture of how fast each of the vehicles were going, when they first started braking, that kind of thing. And so that goes a long way in being able to figure out why the crash occurred.
And you said like a lot of do passenger vehicles have that kind of, like newer passenger vehicles have that kind of technology typically?
Yes. It may not be as advanced as what's in a tractor trailer, but if you have a vehicle that has airbags, if you have a vehicle that has that has any sort of assistive brakes, then you can download and get a lot of that information from a typical Toyota Corolla or Ford Escort.
Are there ever? This may be like a big can of worms, but are there issues of admissibility with that information or that data typically, or is it kind of accepted now?
Well, it's based upon accepted science, but typically what you try to do is, if I get notified about a crash that occurs, I'm immediately trying to reach out to the trucking company, sending an evidence preservation letter, because something that the public doesn't realize is that the trucking company can start destroying records within 6 months of a crash if you don't put them on notice that they have to preserve it. And so when somebody hires me, the first thing that goes out is a certified letter to the trucking company, to the driver, to their insurance company, saying, I need you to preserve the vehicle. I need you to preserve all documentation related to this run. And then, so I'm reaching out and I'm saying, listen, you want to inspect my client's car. I want to inspect your truck. Let's hire our own experts and let's do this as a joint inspection. And so about 75–80% of the time, that's something that can be negotiated. And then, your experts are watching them, their experts are watching yours. And a lot of times that, whether it's the download or whether it's the measurements, really isn't disputed if both sides are, have access to the same information.
Cool. So going back to this case that you talked about, that came to mind when I asked you about notable cases, which it sounds like a pretty challenging situation, at least from my perspective. So you're not able to do much of an investigation on your own because it's months after the crash, right? So you probably what the state police investigated or whatever the agency that I know in a lot of jurisdictions it's a state police that come out and do like a thorough investigation, or I'm not sure how it is in Iowa. But what is the challenge because of that? Because you have, from a sort of like a layperson's perspective, you're like, well, there has to be a decent amount of information from the crash report, but is that not enough, or why is that challenging?
Right. So the Iowa State Patrol did do an accident investigation in this case. The problem is that law enforcement comes in and they're just looking for enough evidence to be able to write a traffic ticket, right? And so, unless somebody was killed, in this case, there were no fatalities. And so the level of investigation was not what we would have done if we had been contacted immediately. And part of the problem was the trooper who investigated, saw this traffic camera footage and said, well, I know who I think is in the wrong, and sort of stopped the investigation. And honestly, when I looked at the traffic camera footage for the first time, I understand why the trooper reached that conclusion. Well, the thing is that they didn't have, he didn't anticipate that the trucking company was going to hire this lawyer who was going to claim that there was this sudden emergency created by a sudden gust of snow that wasn't visible on the camera. And so that was a situation where the trucking company thought that they had a get out of jail free card because if they could argue that there was a sudden gust of snow and that's what prevented the truck driver from seeing my client until it was too late, and the jury believed that to be true, then they would have no responsibility at all for my client's injuries and her losses. So one of the big challenges in the case is, how was the jury going to view the traffic camera footage? What would 8 people in the jury box believe when they saw it? Because I had my interpretation, the trucking company had its interpretation. And then secondly, when the truck driver says, hey, there was a sudden gust of snow, it just isn't visible on the camera, is that something that the jury's going to buy? And so that was, that was the big fighting issue over responsibility. And then, there were other issues related to, of course, the level of compensation that my client was due was also contested.
So how'd you get around that? I mean, what was the outcome of this case?
So we won. The good news is the jury heard all the evidence and decided that there was no sudden emergency, that the trucker was 100% at fault for what happened, that my client had no fault for what happened, because they didn't give that up either. They claimed that if there was visibility, that my client was somehow negligent for slowing down on a snowy highway to make a left turn if there's a semi too close behind her. And so the jury didn't believe that defense. The jury believed that she was injured, and the jury believed that she had losses that were going to require ongoing medical treatment that the trucking company needed to pay for.
But why do you think it had that outcome? Like sort of this phantom snowdrift that you're dealing with. How did you get around that? Did you bring in like a weather expert? Did you just kind of like, did you sort of like, was it the issue of the credibility of the driver, or was it all the above? What did you actually do to get around all that?
Well, first of all, we had, my client who was a very credible witness testified that there wasn't some sudden gust of snow that obscured the vision. And then we had people who had driven on the highway before and after who came in and testified and said, no, we didn't. That wasn't something that was present. And we also had a compelling explanation as to why the truck driver was driving as fast as he chose to, and that was he was trying to get he was trying to get back after probably uh, driving a load in weather that he shouldn't have been driving it. That he was trying to get back home after that, and just was in a hurry to make sure that he wasn't going to have to pull off on the side of the road. So it was a combination of those things that the jury just found that my client's story was more credible than the truck driver's story.
How did you track down the other drivers? Like if there's other vehicles that drove by, like it seems like it would be tough to track down. Was there like a camera nearby? I mean, did it pick up the plates or something from the camera or?
No, so that was part of that was just good fortune. So it turns out that my client, she comes from a family of truck drivers. Her husband drives truck. Her brother drives truck. Her dad was a truck driver. And so her brother had actually made the decision when he looked at the weather forecast that day that it wasn't safe to drive a tractor trailer on this highway that morning. So he had parked his semi and was driving in his personal vehicle to go to his dad's house to help shovel out snow in case the weather got better and they could get on the road. And so he was actually driving on that road where this crash occurred within minutes of when the crash occurred. In fact, he drove past the wreckage because the semi had pushed his sister's car off into the ditch, and he didn't even recognize at first that it was her car. So he was there within minutes, and so he could testify about what he saw, what the weather conditions were, what the visibility was within minutes of when the crash occurred.
Oh, that's okay. So that's a kind of a lucky break when you have a client that knows a lot about trucking and comes from a family like that with that. But this seems very resourceful too. Did that come from just interviewing your client and really understanding like who her family is and her background and kind of drilling into that? How did that come out?
Yes. So one of the things that I enjoy being able to do is really getting to know my client, getting to know what their life was like before their injury, what their life is like after the injury. And so that almost always involves interviewing friends, family, coworkers. And in the course of that discussion, in those discussions, I found out that her brother had actually been on the road in the area where that accident had happened. So then I interviewed him in more detail, found out what he had to say, and that ended up being very, very helpful because I had a stealth juror who could have potentially sunk our case that he was able to protect me from.
What do you mean? Stealth juror?
So, so during jury selection, I was interviewing, I was talking to the prospective jurors, and all you have to go on, because you get the list of the jurors in the courtroom within an hour of when the crash happens. So I'm looking at a jury questionnaire, and there is a older woman in her 70s who lists that she's retired, and she doesn't say where she's retired from. And so I asked her questions, and she was always very coy. She was always very it was hard to get a straight answer about what her job had been. And she's like, oh, I work for my husband. We had we had a small business, and just wasn't really answering the question, but otherwise was very nice, very pleasant, and it wasn't immediately sending off danger warning signs. Well, because I had my client's brother set up to be the first witness in the case, he recognized that juror was one of the founders of a very big trucking company. And so it became clear. So he pointed that out, and it became clear that once she realized that this was a trucking case, that she was trying to stay on the jury, probably in support of the trucking company that we were suing. And so it was only because he was in the courthouse that day and saw her that that then led to me just during a break he pointed that out to me, and I was able to ask very specific questions and get out the extent of her trucking experience, and ultimately that was a reason why we struck her from the jury.
Wow, that is a lucky break. It sounds like you're really listening and paying attention, which I think comes from experience. Would you say that that's something you picked up over time? I find that people who are experienced in their work value like what I call slowing down to speed up in the beginning, like really paying attention to everything in the beginning. Is that something you've learned
Yes,
over time, or kind of bit you early on, or?
absolutely. But the reason why this was possible is because I try to take advantage of everybody who's in the courtroom, because when I'm talking to prospective jurors, my focus is completely on them. I'm not taking notes. I'm not, it's like I am, locked in having conversations with them. And so I know that there are other things going on in the courtroom that I can't see. And rather than saying, okay, I'm the only one who, who can pick up on things, I make sure that, the lawyer who I'm trying the case with, my client, any witnesses, who are there, I tell them all, hey, if you see something that, a juror's, giving me a dirty look when I'm not looking at them,
Yeah.
or anything, I want you to bring that to my attention, before I'm done with jury selection, so I can make sure I explore those things before we have to exercise our strikes.
So it's kind of a fostering an open communication between everybody, would you say, and making people feel comfortable to speak up?
Oh, that's essential, both with your trial team and with the panel as a whole. You want to make it a safe place where people can give honest answers.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, in this juror's case, it was clear that she had an agenda,
Mm.
and was trying to do her best to hide her background from me when I was questioning her.
Wow. Wow, that's great that your client's brother picked up on or saw that. The other issue that comes to mind that's pretty, kind of obviously comes to mind is, was a challenge that this was her brother testifying? Did the defense open that up and say, well, of course your brother's going to say something to defend you, and did they attack his credibility because of that, or how did you get around that if that came up?
Oh, sure. I mean, that's the issue in most injury cases, because the people who witness your clients, the change in their life before and after, are tend to be friends, family, coworkers, right? And so they are always going to be open to a an attack that they're biased, that they're trying to, they're saying something just to benefit the plaintiff. And so, that's why we pick the people who we have testify very carefully, that they are that they're people of integrity, that they're people who, you just get the vibe when you're talking to them that they are straight shooters, and they're, it doesn't matter. They're going to come in and tell the truth, whether it's helpful or otherwise. And so, he, I didn't pick him by accident to be our first witness. He was somebody who impressed me during the when I was interviewing witnesses, and I knew I wanted him to go first.
So when you're presenting this, we talk a lot about storytelling because it's kind of a big thing I do with my business with Clear Eyed Media is case presentation. So when you presented this case, like what was like your first thing that you wanted to present, sort of like the lead for the jury that you kind of bringing them in with?
Right. Well, I think it's important to start with the rules. What rules we have, what laws we have that truck drivers have to follow in order to make sure not only that they're safe, but everybody who's sharing the roads with them is safe. And so you want to educate the jury about those rules, why they exist, how they protect us all. And then once that framework has been set, you can just tell the story of what the truck driver chose to do, what the trucking company chose to do, and the jury can reach conclusions for themselves that they weren't being safe, right? Like if you understand the rules, then it's not me saying, hey, they weren't being safe. Anybody who's hearing the story can appreciate it's like, wait a second, that's not right. They shouldn't be doing that. And so it's really important to be able to tell that liability story first, because it used to be maybe 30 years ago that plaintiffs' lawyers thought that well, just get up and appeal to the jury's sympathy because you have the injured victim. But the reality is if that was ever true, it definitely hasn't been true in my career. Jurors jurors want to know that somebody did something wrong, did something that they shouldn't do, before they're really open to hearing the story of how your client's life has been affected.
That's really interesting because I'm not a lawyer, but you see from the outside, and a lot of times this comes from movies or it's completely inaccurate because it may not be really what happens in a courtroom. But that's really interesting, and it strikes me as a sort of a journalist and a storyteller that it exudes a lot of confidence because it's like, here's the rules, and you're sort of empowering your jurors. Is that what you're trying to do, or is that kind of like the mindset? Instead of like trying to tell them what to think, you're letting them put it together themselves. Is that kind of the strategy, or do you have another way of thinking of it?
So it really comes down to first of all credibility, and at the beginning of a trial, I don't have credibility with the jury because I'm the hired gun that the plaintiff is bringing into the courtroom. And so it's a mistake as a plaintiff's lawyer to think that I can tell the jury anything, because they're going to take it all with a grain of salt. Sure, you're the lawyer. You were hired by these people. Of course you're going to say that. And so it's much better to be that, the Walter Cronkite, just the facts, and tell the facts in such a way that the jury can reach their own conclusions about who's at fault, who did wrong in this particular case.
Yeah, sounds like a very strong approach, and it worked in this case. I'm sure it's worked in other cases for you. But the other thing I've read that you said in some of your online posts, you said that treating a truck crash like a car crash can be a costly mistake. Can you share a story or a case or why you say that?
Sure. So, I mean, part of it is what we already talked about, and that is that the trucking company, it has started their investigation the moment their trucker is calling in to dispatch and saying, "I just hit somebody." You know, they are already collecting evidence. They are already planning their defense immediately, and so if you just sit back and wait, uh, then you're going to be behind the eight ball. You're going to lose the chance to find out the truth of what happened. But the other component of treating a car crash or treating a truck crash like a car crash being a mistake is the why the crash occurred. And I'll tell you, I've been handling truck cases throughout my career, and I have a lot of respect for truck drivers. It's a very hard job, and it's a job that requires expertise. I mean, if you've ever sat uh, in the driver's seat of a tractor trailer, you'll realize that the dashboard has a lot more in common with the dashboard of an airplane than it does with your Toyota Corolla. It's a complicated piece of machinery to operate, and it requires skill and it requires expertise. And so my experience with truck drivers is that the vast majority of them are hardworking, blue collar, salt of the earth people. And the reason why a lot of truck crashes occur is not because the truck driver is a bad person. It's because they were put in a bad situation by their employer. Uh, they were forced to drive, in bad weather. They were forced to drive too many hours. They were put on a schedule that couldn't possibly be accommodated, without driving too fast, or they had been on for so many days of service that they're driving groggy, and so. Uh, the key to understanding why a crash occurred often goes well beyond the driver in a truck case, and you really have to look at the corporate decisions that put that driver in the situation for the for the driving error to be made.
What are some of the most common sort of systemic or corporate decisions that drive these cases or these outcomes, you think, or that you've seen?
Well, I mean, a lot of it has to do with the pressure to meet these deadlines. One of the most common. It's a pretty old book now, but one of the biggest exposés about the trucking industry is called "Sweatshop on Wheels," and it's an expose of the trucking industry in the United States, and how trucking went from this career that you could have and sleep at home at night and raise a family and have a spouse at home with the kids, to a situation where they're only making money if they're moving. There's a popular hat that you can get at most truck stops that say, "If the wheels ain't turning, I ain't earning." And it's that financial crunch that the drivers are in, where maybe they have to choose to drive when the weather says they shouldn't, or they have to drive even when they're tired or they're sick, or they have to drive a route that can't that leaves no margin for error. So maybe if you stopped and went to the restroom, now you're behind, and you're gonna get docked pay or fined if you don't make it there in time. And so a lot of it is just the press of getting the load from point A to point B when the circumstances make it very hard to do it safely.
Cool. And so one of the other things I saw you mention in some of your material online is you said you talked about preventing the trucking company from destroying key evidence. And what are the most common ways evidence disappears in these cases?
Well, if you haven't had them preserve the vehicles, uh, and which is then there are certain things that there are certain electronic recording that once the vehicle gets fixed or gets moved, the engine starts up again. You lose certain you lose certain data, and so you know a lot of times the damage to the vehicle, the location of the damage, uh, it, on the vehicle tells a lot of the story. And if you're not getting to the vehicle before it's repaired, then you're never going to get that evidence. Uh, but there's a lot of documentary evidence, whether it's bills of lading, whether it's personnel files and things like that, that the federal regulations only require a company to keep for 6 months. And so if you have a situation where you haven't put the company on notice that there's the potential for a lawsuit to be filed, and you're asking them to preserve that evidence. I've had this happen where I was hired by a family who was injured when a wheel came off of a trailer and struck their vehicle. And I said, well, I need to get the maintenance records because wheels shouldn't come off of trailers.
Right.
And because the family hadn't hired me until more than 6 months after the crash, they said, well, those maintenance records, were destroyed, in normal course of business. We don't keep them longer than 6 months. And so those are examples of documents of evidence that can be really important to a case. But if you're not reaching out to a lawyer and that lawyer doesn't know to make sure that you're getting that evidence preserved, you can be at a big disadvantage in your case.
Is that like the biggest mistake you see in these cases among other folks trying them? Or is there a bigger mistake or another one?
Well, that's a pretty big one. The other big one is not understanding the transportation cycle, because in a typical car crash case, you look at who has insurance. It's the driver who caused the accident. Maybe it's the owner of the vehicle who caused the accident. But in a trucking case, there can be multiple companies that have responsibility for the vehicle. Maybe one company owns the tractor, another company owns the trailer. Maybe maybe a different company employs the driver. Maybe you have a situation where the driver is having to do something because the person who is shipping the materials is requiring them to do something as part of the contract, or maybe the person receiving the materials is requiring them to back across a highway at night. And so there can be multiple sources of responsibility and of insurance in a commercial motor vehicle case. And so if you don't understand the transportation cycle and you're not looking for that, it isn't like people are going to raise their hand and say, hey, you should sue me too. I have responsibility for what happened.
Right.
I mean, and this gets back to the thing we talked about at the beginning, which is, unfortunately, a crash involving a commercial motor vehicle is rarely just a minor fender bender. The reality is that oftentimes people are horribly injured or they're killed, and just the first level of insurance is not going to be enough to compensate the losses suffered, and that's why you need to be looking holistically at the entire transportation cycle to see if there's anybody else who has responsibility.
Great. That's really interesting stuff because those are like the things you learn, I think, from experience, and that's great. The other thing I wanted to mention is I saw you posted about jury selection. You said good jury selection is like good therapy. And can you
Yes.
explain what you meant by that?
Sure. So, therapy, the goal of the therapist is to create a safe space where the patient can answer honestly and not feel judged. And so, if you've ever participated in therapy, or you're familiar with it, it's really important. The therapist isn't there saying, "Oh, geez, you screwed up," or "Oh, I can't believe you thought that," or "I can't believe you feel that way." I mean, they're trying to uh, create an environment where people can be honest, so that they can hopefully get to the get to the truth of what the patient is going through. Jury selection is very similar in that sense, that you want to create this safe space where the jurors feel comfortable being truthful, because ultimately you're asking them to volunteer life experiences, biases that could potentially impact whether or not they're going to be fair jurors in this case. And if you are acting judgmental, if you are arguing with their beliefs, if you are sending any sort of message that there's a right answer or a wrong answer to the questions that you're asking during jury selection, the typical juror is more likely just to shut down. And that's a real danger in a trial, because jurors are going to speak. Okay. If they don't speak during jury selection, they're going to be speaking back in the deliberation room before a verdict is reached. And so you owe it to your client to make sure that you get them talking while there's still time to either get them struck off the jury or adapt your case, rather than just going into a trial blind with no way of knowing whether or not this juror is going to be a fair juror for your case.
Yeah, and so one of the things I saw in your post was it was you talked about one way what someone did that did not help in getting people to open up. And what was that? Describe it for us. And then also, like, what do you actually like? What are some more specific things that you do to get people to feel comfortable opening up?
Sure. So the example that I was talking about was, yeah, you have in your head, because you know your case as the lawyer, there are answers to questions that you're asking that are good for you, right? Things that you think may make that person a good juror, who is going to understand your case, and maybe will be see the case in the way that you want them to see it. There are also bad answers, right? And so, things that they say that, if somebody gets up in one of my cases and says, I don't believe in money being included in a verdict for pain and suffering, or I don't see why a family should get money when a loved one has been killed. Money isn't going to bring the loved one back. Well, I mean, those are not ideal answers, right, for somebody in my situation. But the thing is that you need to know if jurors feel that way. And so you want to get into those topics, but you want to make sure that you're responding to them, not by trying to talk them out of their beliefs, because that never really works. But instead just listen to them, hear them, and make sure that they're feeling comfortable expressing those things, even though for the most part they recognize that you don't like to hear that answer. And so that's why it's important to create that space where they feel safe, saying their truth.
So it's almost like you want to make them feel like you're friends, but that must be really hard to do in a courtroom. Like you're in a court, they know who you are. You're a
Yeah,
lawyer. How do you do that? That's got to be so
yeah.
hard. Like, what do you do? Is it just kind of the
Well,
vibe you try to give off, or is there more specific stuff that you really do? Or, you just like, "Yeah, I'm comfortable. It's okay. You can tell me, man.
well,
I don't know. Like,
well. I mean,
is
you
there some
explain to them
specific
because
thing you do? Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, they're simple tactics, things like making sure that you're not grimacing when they give an answer that you don't like, or you're not trying to argue with them when they give an answer you don't like. Those are tactics. But in terms of overall strategy, it's really based around the oath that the jurors take, which is to is to tell the truth, to answer questions honestly, and so by setting up that framework with them, it's like, why do you think why do you think you have to give that oath? Why do you think that's important? You know, uh, getting them to at least understand that to do their job, because that's they if they're there, they want to, if they have to be on jury, because nobody's like, raising their hands except for maybe that woman in the case I talked about, uh, who wanted to be on the jury, for reasons that probably weren't proper. Uh, Most people don't want to be on the jury, but once they're on the jury, they want to do a good job. They want to get it right. And so part of it is helping them understand that, part of doing a good job and getting it right is making sure that you're impartial, and that you're not coming in with pre-existing biases or life experiences that are going to make it unfair to one side or the other.
Cool. That's really good. And I know we're kind of getting a little towards the end of our time, but I wanted to ask you a couple of more questions that are just sort of evolved around, like, if as an everyday person and having somebody who's sort of like an expert on the trucking industry or the calamities that within the trucking industry, because you see a lot of them, like, just as a driver, like, do you have any like safety tips? Like if I'm driving down the freeway or something and I see trucks, or if I'm driving around a rural country road, things that you've picked up over the years, like some things not to do or to do if you see a big rig. Anything come to
Sure.
mind?
So, yeah. So, one is, if I am, I try not to tailgate trucks, because they don't have rear view mirrors, right? Yeah, they have side mirrors, and so, you know now, if they have the right side mirrors and they know how to use them correctly, hood mirrors, they shouldn't have significant blind spots. But you want to make sure that you are making yourself visible to a truck, that you are not tailgating them, that and then when I'm alongside a truck, I am doing my best to get in front of them or behind them as quickly and as safely as I can. So I'm not just gonna camp out side by side next to a semi, because uh, they have there's a phenomena called off tracking, where that I mean that they're big enough and long enough that when they're turning to the left or turning to the right, I mean, they're going to be cutting across a lane in a way that other vehicles don't. And so the safest thing that you can do is to give space to semis, and make sure that you're not staying too close to them, because while they are trained and they're supposed to be doing everything right, the thing that you have to understand is they can be on the road for up to 14 hours legally, 14 hours. And when you're driving a truck, it's not like you're driving a car and you're bopping along to the music and you're daydreaming. I mean, to drive a truck safely, you are in a constant state of awareness, a constant state. Your head has to be on a swivel. You got to be paying attention to so many different things. It's exhausting. It's exhausting. And so, you want to make sure that even when they're not at their best, that you're not in a position that you're gonna suffer the consequences of a bad choice that they make.
That's a great answer. But one of the other like sort of everyday Joe questions I have is about self-driving big rigs. They're on certain highways already, but they're forecasted to be running all over the place in the coming years. And this may be an entire episode unto itself, but just if there's a way you could kind of just summarize some of your feelings about that in some of the issues that you foresee from that idea of self-driving big rigs.
Well, I think we're a ways off. And here's what I judge that based upon. One of the things that I did when I first decided that I was going to focus on truck cases is I went to a truck driving school for lawyers in Montana. So I had a chance to drive a semi and go through some of the training that truck drivers do and understand what you can do and can't do while driving a tractor trailer. Since that time, I have gone back as a instructor, not on driving. I'm backing up a semi in the dark is still my kryptonite. I cannot do that well enough to pass the commercial driver's license test. But at the last one I was at, we did some testing with semis with crash avoidance systems, and so there was accident reconstructionists who came out. They brought out the equipment that so they're set up like the back of cars, and so the truck driver would drive a truck towards it and then just see when when the system stops it from how fast you could go before you hit the back of the vehicle. And I'll tell you that as of the summer of 2025, the semi was hitting the back of the vehicle even when the avoidance crash avoidance system was on and operating more often than not. And I asked the technician, the accident reconstructionist, I said, well, gosh, I mean, they have those self-driving taxis, the Waymos are, in a lot of major cities. Would you get into one of those right now? And this guy who's been, doing accident reconstruction and is aware of the technology and its limitations says, you won't see me in one of those yet. The technology just is not there. And so I'm sure it will happen, but it's not there at a level where you can trust technology to safely maneuver an 80,000-pound vehicle on the same roads where you've got your family station wagon.
The last question I want to ask you is, I saw you teach trial advocacy at the University of Iowa College of Law. And what are some of the habits or mindsets you wish more young lawyers had when they entered the courtroom? Or maybe also like what habits did you wish you had when you started out as well?
So a lot of it is, you have the curse of knowledge where by the time you get to trial, a case has been litigated for, more than a year, in some jurisdictions, a couple of years. You have thousands of pages of records and depositions that have been kept. And so you're just coming into the courtroom with so many facts. And so the biggest challenge that young lawyers have is taking all of those facts and turning them into a coherent story that can be understood by jurors. And so a lot of that is understanding what's important, what are details that are not important, and being able to simplify the story down to the essence and be able to present it in a way that people who are walking into the courtroom with no understanding at all are going to be able to understand it. So, there's a lot of traits that a good trial lawyer is the good trial lawyer shares with a good teacher, and that is, being able to teach somebody something that they have no experience with, but to be able to make sure you're not overwhelming them with your curse of knowledge.
Great. That's great. And so is there anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
No, I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about why you can't treat a car crash case or a truck crash case like a car crash case. Unfortunately, that's something that a lot of lawyers probably don't fully appreciate, and it's to the detriment of the people that come to you for help if you don't understand why it's important to treat a truck case specially.
Well, that's it for this episode of Make Your Case. Big thanks again to Tim Semelroth for joining me and sharing his perspective on what it really takes to handle a trucking case the right way. If you found this conversation useful, go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Make Your Case is produced by Clear-Eyed Media, where we help attorneys present their cases more effectively through professional video storytelling for mediation, settlement, or trial. And if you're a lawyer with a case or story worth telling, I'd love to feature you on the show. Just email me at joe@cleareyedmedia.com. I'm Joe Douglas. Thanks for being here.